Phaxi's comfort champions.
Yeah, that's what you got to do, and there's really no other player in the European LCS that they do respect that ban for. On the other side, we got to talk about Cabochard. Yeah. He's been playing a lot of Rumble lately. And
also Renekton alongside the Rumble. You talk about 3 games played last week. Well, this game, he's not getting Renekton so far. One of his other most played champions up until this point. The Rumble has been very high priority for just about every team. The adjustments made it very difficult to fight in the early game, and Rumble actually can turn around situations. We saw that happen yesterday thanks to the added damage you see in the early game in that Fnatic series.
And we've been talking a lot about the different lane matchups and, generally speaking, what are the strengths of each team. But the top lane is where I think really the big difference maker can be, because there's inconsistencies, but the potential for strong play up in the top lane for both teams. But we'll worry about that a little bit later, because with Zach banned away, Elise left open. No-brainer here. We'll see if Djoko's able to get something done, see if they lock that in. A few seconds remaining.
You would imagine it gets locked in, but it doesn't, because Rek'Sai gets locked. So now the Elise is available should Pridestalker want it out of the jungle. He has got 3 games played of that, but Elise is the joint second most banned champion here. It's only Zach really goes above on the number of bans. So interesting Vitality passed that up, because it is the type of playmaking champion that you would expect Djoko to be comfortable on, but then the Rek'Sai has been one he's played historically, but it is going to be one of the first times we're seeing him pick it up since the rework.
Yeah, and Elise is completely given up by both sides here, with the Warwick coming in for Pridestalker. We've talked about these teams' penchant to play for the late game, but that is a lot of power that you've passed on. Yeah,
you've passed a lot of power, but at the same time, now you see what goes along with the Warwick. You got a Caitlyn in that bottom lane for Hjarnan. Has been a decent pick across the meta, a lot of high priority, but generally ROCCAT haven't secured the Caitlyn all that often. But Vitality following up with some further picks, looking at team fighting and Siege here with the Jhin, with the Rumble, some very strong picks in their own right.
But Phaxi's going to get his hands on the Kennen. Of course, Kennen is a champion that we talk about often in the European LCS, but unless it's Fnatic, it's always going to be about that top lane.
Yeah, likely going into the top lane, that Kennen into Rumble, looking to take advantage of the silent. You can see Cabochard, when it comes to this Rumble, decent stats, not exactly record-breaking in his own right, but nevertheless, we'll see how comfortable this matchup is up against one of the top laners that has been struggling when off his comfort champions in Phaxi.
Well, Cabochard having that for himself. We'll see if his laning stats continue to be as improved as we saw the last few weeks. Braum banned out by ROCCAT in Phase 2, as followed by the Cassiopeia away from Betsy.
Now, I think this is more alluding to the fact that they're expecting ROCCAT to want to last pick their mid laner. The Cassiopeia kind of like softly signals a Corki pickup, as everybody is kind of expecting, with Corki being such a strong champion as it is, because ROCCAT is still looking for their support alongside mid laner, and they're not really going to be in quite so much of a rush here. But with LeBlanc off the table as well, that's another strong mid laner that Nukeduck has had historically working in his favor.
Yeah, if you're ROCCAT, you definitely want to give yourself as good a matchup as you can, because we've seen what happens when Nukeduck is in a favorable position. He just goes off, and not 100% of the time, but he's shown that he has that high carry potential. As the last seconds tick down for the ban, is going to be Alistar that's removed.
We have not really seen a whole lot of Alistar here in Europe. But with the move towards melee supports, we have seen 6 games of Alistar around the globe. A lot more often in the LCK, so being banned away, obviously something that Wadid is good for with those engaged supports now not available this time around. Corki picked up by ROCCAT, taken away, not allowing Vitality to have that. Will it be the Kassadin that we saw come out from Splice yesterday?
Might just be, but they're going to pick up a Tahm Kench to pair with their Jhin, the bottom lane complete first, and then the last pickup. It's all to see what Vitality decide to answer that Corki with.
That Tahm Kench, of course, gives them a lot of playmaking potential. Do they want a marksman duel in the middle lane?
I think they might. This does seem like the kind of thing they do to start things off.
Oh,
but that's a little different. Hello.
Okay.
We got the Kog'Maw.
Yeah, we're going back to a Power of Evil type pick. We have seen Kog'Maw recently in the AD carry role. We do not often see it as a mid laner anymore, but potentially something we'll see start coming back when you look at the kind of late game sieging potential. You've got a Rumble, you've got a Jhin, now you've got the Bio Arcane Barrage, the Living Artillery that gives you that extra range. Lots of additional range here coming out of this Kog'Maw.
Oh yeah, I like this. It's some serious long-range action from Vitality squad. Also the ability to get into the backline. You've got the Rek'Sai, you've got the Tahm Kench. They can really become a tower-wrecking crew all together as 5. I want to see how ROCCAT's going to be able to match that because they've got some range of their own.
This is not a pick that I was expecting Nukeduck particularly to pick up out here, but we've obviously been seeing now an extra week of Corki come through. Gives us extra time for the teams to be working on what these counter matchups are. I'm interested to see how this will work out in a laning phase scenario. Theoretically, Kog'Maw shouldn't be too tough harassed down by a Corki, but the gank potential is always going to be there on a Kog'Maw. If you camp it early, deny it having a flash, force him back into the laning phase, he is the type of mid laner that you can put far behind.
Right. Of course, remember, Pridestalker picked up that Warwick. He passed on the Elise pick that was given over to him. We'll see if maybe that sets them a little farther behind on the side of the ROCCAT. But for Vitality, Amato Cannon, his schemes coming to fruition here up against Team ROCCAT. And Vitality are going to need all the help they can get. Down with 1 win in 5 weeks of gameplay. They're looking to make it number 2, but it is going to be a tough ask against a ROCCAT team that, apart from a blip on the radar against Splice, have had a surge here in the summer split. And it is going to be one exciting match against these two teams. ROCCAT in the hunt for them playoffs, and Vitality, they just want to get themselves up on the board. Let's see how it all shakes out as the big guns have come to play here in the EU LCS.
Bringing mortars on this one with Kog'Maw.
And a really annoying laugh with Lulu.
But that one's more expected. That I think is well within the wheelhouse.
That might be my least favorite thing about watching Lulu's. Just in general, just watching League of Legends, Lulu's laugh, it's like the second most annoying laugh in the game.
That's fair. Lux is also up there.
Yeah, Lux is actually the most annoying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Lux not in this game. Lulu is. So this Lulu Caitlyn obviously has a lot of late game protection for this Caitlyn, a lot of late game damage once you get past the 4-item spike, as always. Also can give over a lot of shielding to the Corki, who Corki Caitlyn is perhaps some of the strongest late game partnership damage when you look at it. Like if they don't get engaged upon, very difficult to kill both of them before they end up killing you. And we've always been talking about the late game with Vitality versus ROCCAT.
Well, we'll see if things have any chance of changing this time around. And if they do, Vander, Vitality's got a job for you. Get people into that back line. We'll see if that ends up happening. Can you imagine, though, like the ability to just peck away at everything that ROCCAT have between the Jhin and the Kog'Maw, and then just pull Cabochard into the back line? Yeah, I mean, if they execute it well, that is a ridiculous fight.
It is a ridiculous fight. This is going to be a very interesting game just from these team compositions alone. Because, as you say, a lot of it is about range. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see this game slow down. But right now, Vitality looking to take advantage of this bottom lane by pushing up in the lane, trying to just get the level 1 push on, utilize some of that bouncing grenade out of Steelback and get that level 2 first. But kind of difficult against the Lulu and a Caitlyn. They push themselves quite hard as well. That's
a frustrating lane for sure to deal with. Doesn't matter who you are. Hjarnan and Wadid have been a shining star on this ROCCAT lineup. Steelback, Vander. I haven't seen as much from them, although Steelback last week played a little differently than we were expecting, actually.
Yeah, actually played a little more aggressive than we expected, a little more in the mix of the action, and we'll see whether that continues throughout the game. But one thing that Steelback can do right now is try and effectively trade with that 4th shot from Jhin. One of the reasons why you can run boots on him and get that added sustain is you can just kind of get the extra mobility, run forward, hit them with the 4th shot. Unfortunately, on that one, Wadid shielded it up, and Hjarnan ended up not particularly taking too much damage, but this is an early play out from Djoko. He's gone red buff towards the bottom lane. Normally, this is the time when you anticipate a jungler to be on Rift Scuttler. So if he ends up in the lane, this is maybe 10 to 15 seconds earlier than you would normally expect.
Exhaust, net, here we go. The tongue is on, and he's going to actually have to flash away, but he's rooted up, and Djoko coming on in. Vander gets the eat on, and it looks like we're in for first blood.
Getting that first blood down, as we said, that's a little earlier than you would normally anticipate. Djoko It wasn't the cleanest. Attempted to get the knock-up, actually got it onto Lulu because of the way the Rek'Sai changes actually affect the number of targets knocked up. Only the first target will. Everybody else just gets knocked back ever so slightly, but it doesn't matter because Vander was able to devour, get the repositioning on Hjarnan, and this is what we were talking about when it comes to Hjarnan and Wadid. Last week, they were outclassed by Kobby and Mickey. This week, they're now already down 1 kill. And we're not even past the 4-minute mark.
Yeah, but it was a nice play by Vitality. Yeah. We talked about how it was not as expected to go for that level 3, even on the likes of a Rek'Sai, and Pridestalker just unable to really match that counter pressure.
And that's one of the advantages of a Rek'Sai in the early game is not only do you have good clear speed, you have these unorthodox ways to get in and out of a lane, weird timings that you can actually beat the enemy jungler to. And now you can see Djoko has his red buff, which you'd think they're equal on buffs, but red buff Rek'Sai is difficult to trade with. Look, walks in, Pridestalker now has the red buff for his own, but look, the trading damage has already gone in his favor. Hang on, he's got to be careful though. Look, he can't afford to go too far.
Oh, he's got the fear, and Pridestalker does turn it around in the jungle fight.
Yeah, that's the problem is after Pridestalker gets his red buff, the fight does start turning ever so slightly back in his favor. Betsy
what the hell happened mid lane?
Looked like Nukeduck chased him out. The problem was Djoko stuck around for a longer fight, and since he didn't have his flash from the earlier gank, actually ends up getting caught by the fear, caught in the enemy jungle, and dies for first blood. Don't know whether...
Second, rather.
Sorry, second blood. Yeah, exactly. First kill in the favor of ROCCAT.
Yeah, he does even up the gold game. It's unfortunate. So Djoko does a good, Djoko does a bad. But of course, if it had worked out, all things look good on that end. We'll check back in on the bottom side of the map because while it was Djoko who did pick up the kill, the assist isn't going to be too shabby. Steelback and Vander, if they can keep this pressure on, despite the fact that they are pushed in, they might just be able to do some more.
One difference from this play to a play that happened last week is Djoko actually last week did invades like this when his mid laner wasn't pushing out. Now you can see that Nukeduck had already pushed Betsy back in the lane, and that's why he thinks he's safe against Pridestalker. Djoko should back away completely here. Unfortunately, without a flash, he's trying to close the distance to Nukeduck and maybe turn back around on Betsy. That's not really going to happen at that point. He knew Phaxi was coming out of the lane as well, so despite it maybe looking like the right time to enter the enemy jungle and make a play, Pridestalker gets his red, turns the engage around, and unfortunately, nothing really there for Djoko's favor.
Yeah, it was a little unfortunate to start things off, but we talked about this game going pretty late in the likelihood. Still very, very possible, but it's nice to see the teams trading a little bit early on, even if sometimes it's a bit ill-fated. Still, Steelback and Vander, they're getting some breathing room down here to be able to push. And in fact, beating Hjarnan on the farm game is Steelback right now. He's looking very comfortable on this Jhin.
It's difficult at this point when Steelback has a significant amount of damage. You can see double longsword. While it's not exactly the great difference in damage.
It's double the swords that Hjarnan has.
Anytime that Steelback can manage to close the gap, get last shot down, get the crit strike through, it is tough for Hjarnan actually to balance around that. But you can see from a range, Caitlyn can still maintain this advantage easily. Just got to be careful on the back end of that trade. You don't get hit by Jhin's W.
All right, Djoko once again finding out Pridestalker.
Pridestalker is already level 6, so that is a fight Pridestalker may want to take at this point. Pridestalker kind of getting that easy kill in the jungle from Djoko sticking around way too long in the previous engage.
It's funny how the narrative's shifted a little bit for Vitality in the last couple of weeks. It used to be that Djoko was kind of the guy trying to get the lanes ahead and make things happen. We saw that in the bottom lane, but his role's kind of changed a little bit. He hasn't really had the same level of impact the previous week or two. Yeah,
that's fair. Djoko's early game decision-making hasn't been really the pinnacle of Vitality's good play, but what has been one of the pinnacles from Nukeduck in the middle lane is something that we asked in Champion Select, right? We said, how does Kog'Maw do into Corki? And let's revisit it. For now, ever so slightly up in the laning phase, pushes Corki back quite effectively. So for now, it looks like Nukeduck, now that he's past level 6, obviously has bigger spikes on 11 and 16 with that ultimate. For now, it looks like this Kog'Maw pick is actually working out okay.
But we have to check back in with the bottom because Wadid and Hjarnan are walking right into Djoko, sends the Prey Seeker, but he gets turned into a Munchkin. And they're going to just instantly hop over the wall. Wadid had to flash that one.
Yeah, I don't actually think Wadid had to flash that. Yes, Jhin has a lot of range, but is level 5. Tahm Kench, level 5, didn't have the ultimate available. I think they actually could have punished Djoko a little harder, although you've got to respect the Rek'Sai damage. With that ultimate, you can very easily trade damage back onto a squishy support like that. So I kind of respect Wadid out of fear, perhaps, jumping back into safety.
Absolutely, but you can see that Djoko's definitely decided to fixate his attention down towards bot now that he's been punished a few times in the enemy jungle. But one place we haven't seen much action just yet has been up in the top lane. Checking back in there, you see it's a very even game. And Cabochard on this comfortable Rumble choice. I mean, he's not exactly completely wrecking Phaxi at the moment, but Phaxi has built fairly defensively to start things off.
Right, and when you look at Cabochard over the last couple of weeks, Cabo's actually improved quite significantly. You can see he's been leading at that 10-minute mark in every single one of the games they played in weeks 3 and 4. He was up in CS, and not only that, he had heavily put his opponent down in CS in comparison. Now, that isn't necessarily happening in the solo lane on this point, because they're bringing the duo up to the top side, so it kind of cheats the stats a little bit on this game specifically, but this is something Vitality haven't been afraid to do, is move out of a situation, go and push down on the other side of the map, grab tower first blood, and then try and work that into further advantages.
Yeah, they're far faster on this one, and ROCCAT realizing they can't really counter with the tower push. Instead, they're just going to elect to take the Infernal Drake. So critically for them, it is an important dragon because we know these teams will like to fight it out in the late stages of the game. But that is a big advantage in the early for Vitality.
It's a good advantage to pick up then. You'll see how Vitality will now end up swapping their duo back to the bottom side. Still no level 6 on Tahm Kench, so they can't reliably get there before the tower gets completely pushed down. But they may be able to cut the wave underneath because it's quite a short wave. I don't actually think ROCCAT can finish this. If Steelback can just get some damage down onto this wave of minions, they should be okay.
It's real close, though. Should be able to do it in a couple more waves, and it looks like Pridestalker's actually
this wave should be fine. They should be able to get it here. ROCCAT will be able to answer it. But then look where else on the map Vitality is doing anything. Unfortunately, nothing for Vitality to be doing. So they now lose a tower in response. Djoko's farming up his jungle. Nukeduck had actually recalled. No pressure onto the Rift Herald. No pressure on these secondary objectives when not able to defend their tower in the bottom lane.
So Vitality kind of dropped the ball a little bit there after they had a solid play up top side, and it was a trade somewhat in their favor. Weren't able to get a whole lot else done. You can see when they have actually had success, Vitality, it has been on the blue side for the most part, but it's only a scattered couple of wins, and now Betsy's coming in. He's going to find Djoko, teleport coming, special delivery right into Vander, who's trying to get back to the safety of the rest of his team, but there is no tower to defend there. Grey Health going to have to get popped, and Pridestalker is looking for a hunt, suppresses on, and they grab Vander.
ROCCAT managing to make the best out of a bad situation, losing tower first blood, but then recognizing that you're past the point where the package and special delivery are available. Early TP comes through, making sure they compound this into kills. They didn't want to have this go nowhere, and Vander, despite flashing out, is the target here. Pridestalker easily able to get that suppression. The kill even goes over to Hjarnan, which is quite a significant thing. Remember, we need Hjarnan and Betsy for ROCCAT to be the carries here. You're expecting Steelback, Nukeduck, and Cabochard to have a lot of damage during the mid game and a little bit later on, but it's not quite as strong as what ROCCAT are bringing in the late game.
No. And you can see there's actually some defensive mindset, of course, even on the Vitality side in the mid. Nukeduck goes with the Wit's End first.
Yeah.
He knows he's going to be able to limit some of the damage out from Betsy.
And now that's an interesting one, because we had anticipated that a mid lane Kog'Maw would theoretically go towards AP. This is an AD Kog'Maw. Nukeduck has 0 AP currently. Interesting that approach to go here. I want to see how it transitions throughout the rest of the game. They obviously have enough AP coming from Cabochard when you look at Rumble in team fights, but Nukeduck, of course, will be playing this now static AD marksman in team fights that'll have great late game shreds, so that does give them some sense of late game insurance on top of that.
Ooh, he's looking for even more. He had a couple of shots with the Bio-Arcane Barrage into Living Artillery, but in comes Phaxi right now, and he's able to get a 2-man stun off, buying time for Pridestalker to join. In for a little bit extra damage, doesn't get the duress, but he doesn't even need it, and Phaxi gets the finishing kill. ROCCAT, they got the gank squad down mid.
That was a nice little combination. Pridestalker didn't actually have his ultimate available, as you said, but getting the flash in with the fear into the Lulu ultimate just causes enough crowd control on its own that Nukeduck, after flashing out already, had nowhere to go, and it means that ROCCAT taking a good fight in the middle lane. Vitality, however, focusing heavily on the towers for now, will maintain the gold lead. And we talked about late game damage out of Kog'Maw, still has a decent amount of damage here when you look at up against Betsy early on. But then the rest of ROCCAT arrive, and it's a 2 versus 4 situation. Combo manages to get both Djoko and Nukeduck with that knock-up, and ROCCAT able to take that fight.
Yeah, looking to take a Rift Herald as well, but Pridestalker at half his health is kind of sitting in the pit here. Goes on to Djoko, and only Cabochard is there to give him a little extra defense, and as soon as he hops the blast cone, they will trade junglers. But that was a little bit hairy. Yeah, a little bit of an awkward situation there because Djoko knew his team had the advantage when it comes to the map play, but couldn't quite get there in time to save Djoko's life, if that makes sense. The rest of Vitality not quite quick enough. They do manage to pick themselves up the Rift Herald. It was a valiant attempt from ROCCAT to try and dissuade them off it while Phaxi's busy on the bottom side. We talked about Wit's Ends. Of course, he picked one up as well. Going for that attack speed, trying to get the side push on. Be the top laner. Yep, trying to just control that side lane, of course. Very difficult the later the game goes for Rumble to particularly stand in front of a Kennen. The problem is, the side lane push style has not been one that I feel has been too conducive to Phaxi outside of Nah. He's had success on Fiora, he has had success on that Nah, but remember the Jarvan game, where he just got camped in the side lane, granted, against Fnatic, and that's one thing they're exceptionally good at. But you have to start looking at how do you pick apart a player that perhaps isn't quite so safe out on the side lane at all times, and I'd like to see Vitality try and punish, maybe utilizing some of the range for this Rek'Sai engage, and actually utilize the Tahm Kench, punish Phaxi for pushing up too far. Right, but this could also be a litmus test for Phaxi to try and expand that viable split push champion pool, because we really did kind of peg him down as he's the guy who's going to go for this Gnar pocket pick. He's going to be able to do well on it and counter pressure a lot. His Fiora can be good if he can get ahead. But outside of that, yeah, it is kind of a big question mark. Like the Phaxi Toxi only goes sometimes. Not during the rain like it was yesterday. No, it won't pick you up if it's too wet out there, I know. There was a lot of rain yesterday in Berlin. Roads were chaos, but on this point... It's a great day to stay inside and play video games, isn't it? Yeah, and watch video games as well. And that's what we're doing, Pyro. We're doing that right now. We're seeing video games happening. Well, it looks like it's more than just that. Delivery service is still working right now, but Betsy is looking for someone to sign. Vander, Steelback, both stepping up. Now he's not going to go any farther. Man, I wanted that to be something. Attempted delivery. Yeah. He just leaves that That's notice. Pretty typical, isn't it? Yeah. Didn't even knock the door. But at this point, Vitality, they do have the gold lead, ever so slight. It is basically an even game, which is what we were expecting between these two teams. We expected no team to really punish in the early game all that heavily, although Vitality have done a good job utilizing their tower pushing. Now, keep in mind, they do have that Rift Herald as well. Cabochard may be looking to line it up in the middle lane as he crosses through, but Vitality looking for this mid tower that sits behind currently Hjarnan and Wadid. Yep, you can see the defense from ROCCAT as well. Vitality really want to push in on this, but they're getting a little impatient here, so Nukeduck's going to step forward, and Vander's taking the Abyssal Voyage, looking for Hjarnan the Tongue Lash. Importantly, they saw Betsy go to the top lane over a bunch of wards. They know Phaxi is in the bottom lane, so there isn't really anybody to defend this tower from the Rift Herald push. Vitality say that's all we needed. We don't need to push ourselves too far through. It's just going to be the one tower, but still, look, that's Vitality cracking all three of ROCCAT's outer towers, giving them a much wider playing field now for the next 10 to 15 minutes. Importantly, they're even able to defend the top because Betsy was marching some minions there, but Cabochard broke off from the assault just early enough to make it happen, and this is where the game starts to pick up a little bit in the pace. You can see the item spikes getting closer and closer. Betsy's sitting on 2 items of his Trinity Force, but he's getting close to being able to hit that. And honestly, Nukeduck just on this Wit's End has not had a whole lot of problem doing damage. Well, yeah, part of the reason why Betsy's a little delayed perhaps on the Trinity Force, he's gone for the boots first. Did that as basically alongside Jhin early on. One of the reasons is he wants to get out of attack range, dodge out a lot of the living artillery. See that being used to try and clear the wave away, and there's 5 members. ROCCAT are here, but Cabochard's incoming, throws on the equalizer. That's a lot of damage being dealt, but can they get the lockup and knockup? Looks like that's the case. The curtain call opens up, and ROCCAT are trying to scatter back, looking for some return fire on Cabochard. They may be bleeding, but they are unkilled. A lot of damage down from Vitality initially, utilizing that Rumble ult. It looked like it was going to be a real strong setup for them, especially with Nukeduck having hit that level 11. Of course, it's not that AP Kog'Maw that we were talking about, but does have that second point in his ultimate, which does significant damage, but it wasn't quite enough. Even with Steelback opening up the curtain call to get a kill for themselves, ROCCAT were just able to disengage by running through the mid lane. Vitality did manage to get a consolation prize in the form of that Mountain Drake, but I'm glad you talked about Steelback because this champion, it does seem like the type of champion that Steelback from a few weeks ago especially would play pretty much consistently, especially when Jhin was like one of the big flavors of the meta. But last week we saw him play very, very differently. But at least this is very conducive to that comfortable style where you can still dish out the damage.
Yeah, that's fair. You know, it's one of these team fighting, sieging styles where he sits very far back in the fight. However, Jhin, obviously, you can sit back and do a lot of damage. But that's what you were alluding to from last week, Pyra. That Twitch play that we saw come out of Steelback. High damage percent, high kill participation, which is good. It's a positive. And people will also say, but hang on, his deaths per game went up as well. I argue that's still fine because he actually did more. I don't mind if you die once more in a game, but you output significantly more damage. This is more in line with the average damage percent for AD carries in Europe. We did a big segment a couple of weeks back about how Steelback was significantly lower on damage. That's what we wanted to see him improve on, and that's what he showed us last week. We need to see some more of it.
Well, we might just. Here we go. Steelback getting brought in by Vander. The equalizer is thrown down, but Phaxi escapes from most of the damage. Unfortunately, Vitality aren't able to shut the trap fast enough. Vander going to walking, but he finds Pridestalker out in his own jungle.
We're a little bit later in the game than the Cabochard storyline we picked up earlier. Cabo's still heavily ahead in CS this time. Of course, he has had a easier time standing on a tower, absorbing the wave that Betsy pushed out. But look, a lot of the farm is going over to Betsy. In fact, he's recalling out. That tells you a lot about how much they're actually putting stock into Phaxi in the side lane, that they're not giving him the farm alongside. I mean, sure, there's the argument to be made that a Kennen should theoretically hold the side lane against a Rumble in a long lane later on anyway, but still need to give him the goal to get there.
Yeah, you got to make sure your game plan is followed to the letter, and as it stands, I mean, we're 20 minutes into this. Vitality, they have a gold lead. It is not huge, of course, but they have been making generally more plays, even if ROCCAT still holds the edge in kills. The towers have been very important. Vitality playing for these objectives. They're still trying to dive on occasion, but they're doing it in a manner that's really not punishable by ROCCAT.
Yeah, they realistically have been stepping up to an objective saying, hey, is this one we can take? ROCCAT go, yes, and Vitality take it. Or ROCCAT just kind of fight back slightly in the middle lane. We saw a couple of engages go ROCCAT's way, utilizing bringing Phaxi into the fight very early, more akin to team fighting, which is not necessarily how the Kennen is always played. But again, we talked about late game. We've still got a long way to go before we get there. So right now, it's no surprise that these two teams are a little bit more hands-off than you would expect other teams to be.
Of course, it's always going to be the style that they like to play, but for very different reasons, right? Like Vitality, I think they have shown times where they've wanted to be aggressive in the early game, in the mid game. We just haven't seen a whole lot of success out of them. And when we have, it has been in the later stages of game. ROCCAT specifically try to play to that style every time.
Sure. Yeah, ROCCAT, they try and just hold on as long as they can.
And turn it around. I mean, it worked against Fnatic.
It did.
How many teams can say that?
How many teams can say they died 13 times as the top laner and still beat Fnatic?
It was the 13th. That one's the charm for sure.
Exactly.
Phaxi this time is doing a little bit better than that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was overconfidence from Fnatic in that series, which is part of the problem. Not something that they've shown us against since. And it's important to talk about here because I think if you don't take ROCCAT seriously, they are a team that can punish you. Whether it's late game fights, whether it's unexpected trades in the bottom lane, those are some of the strengths that we have seen. And that is certainly one thing that you can put in there, like a feather in their cap. But that's not exactly reliable that the enemy underestimate you. You can't go into a game thinking that that's your game plan.
If it happens consistently, yeah, sooner or later people are going to start catching on, but now ROCCAT are trying to make the push down mid once again. They've had a lot of attempts on this tower, but this time there's no ult from the Tahm Kench available. He used it last. Finally, that tower will fall, so ROCCAT get number 2 for themselves. Still looking to try and finish off number 3, but Nukeduck had gone back up towards the top, and he pushed Betsy back. Steelback is able to finish off the rest of that wave, and Hjarnan did have to walk home.
So we're seeing Wadid on this Lulu, keeping the Spell Thief's edge as it is for now, rushing towards that Ardent Sensor for himself, trying to help out with some of that shielding, the healing.
I mean, that's the big primary point, right? You have your 2 big damage carries in Betsy and Hjarnan, and he can protect them both.
Yeah, and part of the reasoning for that is you know, unlike other champions that go the Spell Thief's route, you're not necessarily rushing towards any kind of damage. You're not realistically looking to quickly rush towards the Frost Queen's claim or the eye item You don't necessarily need it. At this point, he's just like, okay, I'm just going to make Betsy and Hjarnan as strong as I can for the rest of this game. I am not doing much more than that. That's unfortunately Wadid's situation. Unlike the last couple of weeks where Wadid has been like, give me Rakan, give me these fun champions. They're going to go in, go aggressive.
Ooh, speaking of aggressive, Betsy
that's through an exhaust.
Yeah, he does not care. He's got infinite tennis balls.
He does. It's got a tennis ball machine just firing off at that point. That was through an exhaust. Nukeduck kind of just taking it to Betsy at that point. That's something that we really have to look at for this pick from Nukeduck, is how effectively he can actually get that damage off now in team fights, because there's going to be a Kennen, there's going to be a Corki, a Warwick, everybody there trying to do damage to him, which should give Steelback a little bit of room in team fights as well to stand at that long range that we've come to expect.
Yeah, giving all the comfort that Vitality really needs, and because they were able to clean up the map as best as possible, look at that, instantly able to equalize on Infernal Drakes, and they have that extra mountain as well. So with the Dragon RNG kind of going in a favorable way, Vitality are pretty happy with the way this game's going so far.
They'll be okay, but it gives over a gold lead to ROCCAT, and of course that doesn't include the kind of implied gold that comes in with the dragon stats that comes through. So Vitality, they're not going to be unhappy to give away an outer tower at 24 minutes in exchange for a Mountain Drake, or sorry, an Infernal Drake. But at the same time, again, these two teams trading just back and forth on what objectives they're going to give to each other, and realistically just being hands up. It's been a long time since we've had a kill in this game.
Oh yeah. 2-4 still at 25 minutes. Hey, you know, yesterday
there was a
lot lower one.
Pirate?
I don't know, man. I always want the big action games, but the teams aren't obliging me, and I guess that's just my lot this time.
You get the slow ones with 4 marksmen and maybe like a Kennen.
But here's the good thing, right? Like, you have an open map, it's going to be a little slow for a while, but when the fights do actually start, because it's so close, it's going to be epic. I say that it's going to be like 0 kills or
right.
whatever, but whatever.
That's what I'm saying. Is this better be the most hype you've ever been. Not really.
I mean, I think that's a tall ask, man. I've gone to 11 a few times. I don't know if I can make a 12 happen right now.
So something tells me that maybe Vitality ROCCAT isn't exactly where you should be going.
What are you talking about? It's a great game.
The hypest you've ever been, but realistically, it is that kind of boiling pot that we're waiting to kick off. No real effect of that happening though right now, because look at it. Unless Cabochard can get a good flank, utilize the equalizer from range, which he's just utilized in the bottom lane to clear waves, that right there is the story of this game. Cabo's like, great, team fighting ultimate. Gonna just clear the wave with it, everything's fine. I can't take this Kennen in the side lane, so I'm not gonna deal with it.
But that's the win right now for ROCCAT. They can keep doing this for a while, and honestly, it lets them kind of keep the game going, and you can see that that's kind of been the forte as we've been talking about the series.
They've been doing this for a while, long enough to be ranked 10th, and until yesterday even lower for ROCCAT, but now up into 7th from the Fnatic Splice series. But
yeah, that tipped one over for sure.
Yeah. But you can see how long it normally takes these teams to close out. That's significant back-to-back, like Baron setups, Elder Drake setups, and ROCCAT and Vitality, they pretty much the treants of the EU LCS.
Let's not be too hasty, all right? Now, Betsy might find himself on the wrong side of this one, although there is a teleport coming in for Cabochard, who does not have his equalizer, and Vitality do not have a care. Betsy trying to walk it out, but Djoko getting the Void Rush on to finish the kill off. ROCCAT scrambling to respond to the 3-man squad of Vitality, and the rest are joining Steelback, bringing up the rear here. Steelback might just be 1 for none.
He was cut off at the side of the fight, which meant the Vitality couldn't all in for the rest of the fight. You can see Nukeduck pretty much unscathed in that exchange, but Vitality aren't rushing towards this Baron. They're not even kind of daring ROCCAT to come to the pit yet. Now that they clear the ward, suddenly Vitality maybe have this presence. Think about how quick their Baron clear is. You have a Kog'Maw, you have the Rumble, you have a lot of damage here that can actually shred this down. But look, Phaxi from the flank, Vander's quite low. Cabochard was tanking the Baron for a second. ROCCAT may look to set this fight up.
He hops over, and this time it's a little bit too early, and all of a sudden Vitality with the patience, they peel right off. They should be able to take down the Warwick. It's Pridestalker, and now there's no more smite available to counter. It's going to be going the way of Vitality. The curtain call has been opened. Hjarnan tanks 1, dodges a 2nd, dodges a 3rd. The 4th is going to clip him, and Djoko's right there to try and cut him off. He wants to get it all done, but Cabochard ends it with the kill. It's 2 for 0 after all is said and done for Vitality.
It looked like Hjarnan was going to try and dare Djoko to duel him, and then suddenly Rek'Sai burrows underground, and no longer can you really take that trade. Vitality with the Baron pickup should be enough to accelerate this game. This should be enough for them to set up and look to siege down those towers. And honestly, it was at first a slow call out of Vitality, but an easy one once Pridestalker jumps in too early. 3k health still left on the Baron. Way too much, but ROCCAT's still trying to chase Vitality out of their territory.
See if they can grab a little bit back, and unfortunately the answer is no. And yeah, it was just a little bit too early for Pridestalker to hop in. Didn't have any vision, but wait a minute, Betsy is still going in.
I mean, that's ballsy.
That was not the best advised blast cone I have ever seen, but glad he had a Valk still.
I mean, I think he was anticipating that there was only one person in that bush. So this is where Pridestalker goes in to the pit. Obviously no vision, so he had to kind of gamble that Vitality was still doing it. Look at the miscommunication here. Phaxi pulls back away from the pit now. Doesn't want to go in because it would be 2 versus 5. Hjarnan and Wadid kind of not in position here, and Hjarnan actually puts himself in a lot more danger than he needed to be here. No way was he actually going to be taking that Baron down, and steps close enough that he ends up getting picked off in this fight. You can see he wants to trade versus Djoko. Hjarnan swaps to try and deal with Cabochard, doesn't have the damage to deal with either of them, and ROCCAT not looking so great right now when you look at that Baron control. Hjarnan knows he played with fire and stepped too close to that Baron pit.
Yep, got burned on that one. So 5-4 is now what we got in kills, but this is a bigger gold lead than we've seen for most of the game. 30 seconds, another Infernal Drake spawning. So Vitality pretty much have everything that they want at the moment, and even if they were looking for a slower march to victory, they might be able to speed some things up too. A lot of damage, big spikes coming out. You can see Djoko, he has that Black Cleaver. Ginsu's Rage Blade on Nukeduck.
And speaking of Nukeduck, while in Champion Select, we talked about how ROCCAT could maybe camp Nukeduck in the middle lane, could maybe put him behind because Kog'Maw kind of unsafe if he doesn't have that flash, difficult to contest. That wasn't the game plan from ROCCAT in the early game. They didn't look towards the middle lane. They looked towards the bottom lane to try and snowball Hjarnan, which is understandable. You can see why that would be the game plan for ROCCAT, but unfortunately, this Kog'Maw has been punishing them heavily, putting up some serious DPS.
Absolutely, and now Vitality are able to take away this last Infernal. They are going to unfortunately trade a lot of damage on their second-tier top tower, but at this point with the lead they have, I don't think they're too worried about how things are going. Phaxi's still trying to play that split push game, but Vitality know that they can just 5-man it.
But realistically, he's not doing enough on this split lane, this side push. And it's not necessarily his fault, because look at who he's playing into. He's playing into a Kog'Maw that can clear the wave very quickly with Rage Blade, with everything else. He's playing into a Rumble, which can clear the wave quickly, and then he's playing into the Vitality bot lane, who he's never going to be really realistically around, because they're sat mid lane. They're just pushing mid all the entire time. So there's no real way for Phaxi to be doing too much more than looking for a flank in team fights. And you can see that's one of the things that Grabs and the rest of the ROCCAT team going to have to overcome. Theoretically, if this game doesn't go their way, how to fix that going into game 2.
But for the Vitality side, I mean, this is a lot of rejoicing you have to give them right now. Obviously, they still have to close this game out. There's plenty of room for mistakes, but considering the fact that this is a team that has only one win, and that was against Mysterious Monkey's pre-roster changes, and even that looks somewhat questionable, that's a lot of improvement to show. And here we go, the curtain call comes in, and Hjarnan's popped down by 1. Another shot hits Wadid. He's trying to dodge, duck, and dive, and it looks like Cabochard's just going to be able to charbroil him. And
the one time Phaxi is pushing out in the bottom lane, his bot lane themselves get engaged upon. That forces now Phaxi to recall back away. It's a tough spot for ROCCAT because they are desperately trying to hold on to everything that they can, and they're treading too far forward. You can see Vitality, a decent Baron power play, under the average, but when you look at how Vitality are slow to close out games, when you look at how they normally play, this is a lot cleaner than we've come to expect from.
This is under the average game time for them by a wide margin right now. Let's see if they can close it out here as they take the inhibitor, looking for Phaxi as well, who's forced to flash just out of the range of the Bio-Arcane Barrage and the Living Artillery. Still with the minion wave, they no longer have that Baron to rely on, but they have been able to break open the base and start their work on taking away everything from ROCCAT.
There is perhaps one last chance available for ROCCAT here when you look at the timing in this game. If they lose the next fight significantly, it's going to go horribly wrong, but they are starting to reach that 4-item point for Hjarnan, the 4th item soon for Betsy. Look at that equalizer.
Right in the choke.
Nothing to do here. Wadid manages to dodge out the last shot, but it doesn't matter because Cabochard's there to chase him down. And you can see that's just from stepping a little too far forward. Suddenly that Jhin off screen, the Rumble off screen, puts enough damage down that you're not even safe in your own mid lane.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking early game about Cabochard being forced to throw his ult just to try and counter wave clear on Phaxi, but at the end of it all, I mean, he's having a great game right now, hasn't died, been able to have a massive impact in the team fights such as they have been, and look at that, not too bad on the damage front either.
Yeah, this Kog'Maw actually doing a little bit less damage than I had anticipated, in the sense that we've seen him
we did come in thinking it was AP,
down,
right?
We've also seen him shred down Betsy a whole bunch of times, but that's a little bit more reliant on trading with auto attacks. It's kind of to be expected. Just was expecting him to have done more damage than Hjarnan, but Hjarnan's had some big headshots, a lot of trading potential in the fights as well. But this has been a lot more composed out of Vitality. A lot of, well, when you look at how they've taken their advantage and actually now compounded into a significant lead,
yeah,
I think
over
it's
and
been
over
better.
again. Been able to iterate on it for sure. And ROCCAT have had, you know, some solid attempts at making individual plays, a couple of catches here. Pridestalker's kind of been at the forefront of a lot of them, but past the early game, it just hasn't really panned out. And you can see Betsy not respecting side lane pressure, Vitality able to collapse. They're utilizing Vander's Tahm Kench to get behind the line. I mean, Vitality are following this game plan, and this is real growth from them. And
Vitality had an early game plan, utilizing this Rek'Sai, go down to the bottom lane, get first blood, and then never look back. Swap to the top side, get another tower, look for more objectives, and now they're looking for the fight because they know they have the advantage. They've cut ROCCAT in half.
There we go again, one more time. Phaxi is going to get his ultimate on, and Vitality might have bitten off a little more than they could chew, but they turn for Pridestalker here, should be able to take him out. Nukeduck firing down the shots. 1, 2, 3, 4. In comes the curtain call, and now ROCCAT are forced to scatter away. What did Betsy trying to dodge out the shots, and Betsy's going to have to flash at the end of it all. It is a 1 for none to start things off, but let's see what else they can do for round number 2. Nukeduck dodging and diving, and Arcane barraging, and he's going to be able to pick up a spree kill onto Phaxi. Djoko with a 2-man knockup on Burrow, and just like that, they nearly wipe ROCCAT off the map.
That was a good turnaround in that team fight from Vitality. Nukeduck clearly knowing the damage output here in these later game fights with the Kog'Maw, able to take down multiple members of ROCCAT. Djoko comes in for the double knockup at the end, and everything goes Vitality's way. This might just be a significant enough damage dealt to ROCCAT that Vitality could end the game.
3-1-4, easy as pie, and Vitality are looking to finish this one off with only Betsy left to try and defend. Pridestalker coming back into the last second, but Cabochard is getting the burn on, and now Pridestalker's not going to last too long. Down he goes, Betsy on the fountain, and that was a style kill. 35 minutes under that average for Vitality, and they are going to take 1 kill, 1 win up in this series. Looking alive, boys. GG.
Certainly showing some strong vital signs at the end of that game was Nukeduck. 5-1-4 on the game. The analyst has talked so heavily about how he is going to be one of the big proponents, the big foundations in this game for Vitality, and bringing out a bit of a clutch pick, something we haven't seen in the mid lane all that much. Pick we don't really expect from him, and what a sublime performance, realistically. Handily dealt with the Corki that so many mid laners have had trouble with.
Absolutely, and this is a big statement for a team that has only managed to get 1 series win in the European LCS in cross-group up against a team like ROCCAT that, apart from last week, were looking pretty damn good. Now the tables are turning.
Oh, this is the ROCCAT that beat Fnatic. I mean...
And then Vitality, if they beat them, then are they by the trends? No, we're not going that way, are we?
Don't go that way, because I can't say the word. I can never say that word. But it's okay, because right now, 1-0 on the series for Vitality. I think a lot of people were expecting ROCCAT maybe to come in as the favorites here. Their recent results, their play style, we thought perhaps they could get to the late game. Well, credit to Vitality, because they actually punished them a little heavier in the mid game than we've seen Vitality do in recent times. And I think, as you were saying at the end, certainly stuff that Vitality have been working on is paying off.
And like, there's a lot to question at the start of the split, and even in the last few weeks, of a coach like Kennen, who has an impressive track record with his former team Splice. But now, maybe that's the plan coming together. So Vitality, they struck first with a win in game 1. Let's send it over to the analysts for more.
Thank you very much, Pyra. And to tie back to what we spoke about before the match, thinking that no team would get a big advantage in Snowball per se, and that is exactly what happened. It wasn't like a team Snowball out of control. And we also said in the early game, exactly, in the early game, because that was key, because Nukeduck did go off. And I think I want to center most of this conversation about Nukeduck and the pick specifically. First up, Kog'Maw is not a pick that we've seen so often in the mid lane. And also, I thought he was going to go for AP Kog'Maw, but he went for full attack speed, attack damage Kog'Maw. So why do you think he went for that in this case, and why is it good for Vitality?
So this is a pick that's kind of appeared in scrims, specifically picked against Corki in the mid lane, because Corki's laning phase is not that hard to play against. It's very easy actually for Nukeduck in this case to just kind of free farm and even win some of the traits by rushing Wit's End, the first item he's going for, obviously to get some magic resist as well, which makes it fairly simple and easy for him to get to 2 or 3 items. That then means he can actually start being super impactful in team fights.
Yeah, we're going to get that item build up just in a second as well. And how does that help him in accelerating the game, or what he wants to do late? Because, okay, it's good in-game versus Corki in the beginning, but how did Vitality spread all over the map, and how is he good in the further team fights?
Well, then, obviously, so Vitality's draft is very much like team fight. As we also actually talked about before the game, Vitality wants to get to late game team fights, and ROCCAT is the split pushing team, so they have the Kennen for split push. What Nukeduck managed to do, because he actually got to his 2 items like Blade the Rune King and Wit's End very quickly, he actually felt confident going to the side lanes and trying to 1v1 people, and he felt like he had enough like tools to do that, which is something I didn't expect to see from this specific pick. But if we actually pull up this replay, he was the man who created that advantage that allowed the team to win. So we actually sit it right now with ROCCAT vision, because I want to show when Nukeduck goes missing on the top lane, how little ROCCAT sees on the top side. They have like 2 wards of value, and that's about it. So right now, they don't know where Nukeduck is. They don't know where the support is. They just see there was a Jhin mid lane right now, and they see Rek'Sai at Baron. That's it. Betsy even checks with his ROCCAT here. So he does not expect anyone to randomly walk in behind him. A sneaky Nukeduck with Vander shows up, and suddenly Betsy is completely caught. The rest of the team is in the mid lane, and this was the one pick that allowed Vitality to go Baron. And once they got the Baron, they actually were able to really snowball the game, because now the split pushing comp is under siege. They can't split push. They have to try and fight their way out, and that's exactly what Vitality wanted to do. So this little sneaky play that not a lot of players will go for, because normally there's a ward somewhere spotting you, and then you just completely overextend it. But he had Vander with Devour behind him. He was like, you know what, boys?
Was he not able to... how easy would it have been for him to 1v1 Corki without any support?
At this point, he could definitely still do fine in the 1v1, but you should never get... As a low mobility AD carry, you should never be allowed to 1v1 in a side lane like this. Like a teleport will happen, a support will come up, a jungle, like something, you know, someone will appear and just kill you because you're completely overextended. Corki can just Valk away. Yeah. You can't. You're stuck there. But that's why the sneaky play was like super fun, and it was just interesting how ROCCAT, most of the game, just barely had any vision at all. So stuff like this could happen, which actually cost them the Baron and then the game.
Stuff like this could happen, and Nukeduck played it well also in every aspect of the game. And you also want to take a look at this next team fight, specifically looking at Nukeduck's positioning, because obviously he has to get those auto attacks off. Oh, this is the Baron.
Well, we do see them get Baron first. They deserve that credit. You know, Pridestalker thinks he can steal it. This time Vitality just says, you know what, let's stop damage on Baron, and then we can just kill the guy, which is the correct choice, and then they can
Nukeduck's just in the pit.
He's in there, but basically lesson for everyone. If there is a jungler around who could potentially steal the Baron, stop DPS before it's too low, let the guy jump into the Baron pit, kill the guy, then finish Baron right after. Nice little long auto attack there from Nukeduck as well, but we did get to see some late game fights from Nukeduck where he was actually able to position in the front line, which is something we've seen from some solo queue clips that people were putting around on Twitter as well. And I think just overall, he played extremely well in terms of his overall positioning and even creating some plays like the one we saw earlier on a champion that normally would not do it. And obviously then the team can just kind of play around him. And it was a very successful pick suddenly.
So on the scorecard of how good is Nukeduck and is he the second best mid lane in EU, he brings out a new pick. He brings out a cool build. He brings out a champion that is hard to play, and he has to carry the game. Hey, he's getting straight A's for that one.
Sure, but I mean, so the thing is, I think we have some really good mid laners in the top in Europe. I think Nukeduck, as I said earlier, is up there, but I would put Febiven above him right now. Probably, I would even consider putting Febi like tied for first with Caps. and then Perks and Nukeduck will come underneath. But I still got to see slightly more from Nukeduck before I put him above Perks and the others.
All right, and maybe we see more from him in the next game as well. We'll see if he picks another champion and carries Vitality.
He probably will pick a champion.
He will pick a champion, that is for certain. They need one more win to take the series against ROCCAT. Game 2 is coming up after the break.
In the hunt for them playoffs, and Vitality, they just want to get themselves up on the board. Let's see how it all shakes out as the big guns have come to play here in the EU LCS.
And he's got to be careful, though. Look, he can't afford to go too far.
Oh, he's got the fear, and Pridestalker does turn it around in the jungle fight for Cabochard, who does not have his equalizer, and Vitality do not have a care. Betsy trying to walk it out, but Djoko getting the Void Rush on to finish the kill off. Hjarnan tanks one, dodges a second, dodges a third, the fourth is going to clip him, and Djoko's right there to try and cut him off. He wants to get it all done, but Cabochard ends it with the kill. 35 minutes under that average for Vitality, and they are going to take one kill, one win up in this series. Looking alive, boys. GG.